Welcome to the Strategic Leader Podcast with me, Gemma Bullivant, and my co-host, Fiona Craig. This podcast is for HR professionals and people-focused leaders from any function who want to think, act, and feel naturally more strategic. Enjoy the show.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Strategic Leader Podcast. Hello, Gemma.
Hi, Berfie. Hi, everyone.
It's really nice to be back. We feel like we have had a bit of a break. We've had Christmas. We've had, Gem, you've been on holiday, haven't you? Where have you been?
Las Vegas, baby.
Las Vegas, baby. I have been here eating my body weight in cheese. So we're cranking it back up for the new year. And maybe you're feeling the same. By the time this goes out, if we're all still feeling as cranky by the time this goes out, we may have to do something about it. But right now we're back in the fold. Welcome back. Now, what are we going to be talking about today, Gem? Give us a summary of our subject matter.
Well, today we're going to be talking about strategic self-care, which is really, we've talked a bit about the know-how, if you could call it that, around strategy, some of the tools, techniques, models, things to think about when we write a strategy or we approach something in taking a more strategic approach to a challenge. But actually, how we show up could fundamentally undermine any of that fabulous know-how and the skills, the strategic skills that we may have acquired and want to show off to the world. So it's about really not letting your well-being or your emotional state, your emotional energy, or any other form of how you show up undermine your strategic impact.
That's great, isn't it? Because I think we've all perhaps been aware of people that we rate very highly and we know that they're excellent at their jobs, but we always have a notion that they are always a bit stressy or always a bit kind of panicky about something or over emotional about something or stressed out about something. And that tends to be the thing that we remember about them more than their actual professional competency.
And it relates really to what we all really do know, which is it's all very well having the skills, the what, but then we do also have to show up and show those skills in the right way. And what we're going to be talking about today is one of the things that can affect the way that we show up and affect the impact of those skills is our own well-being.
Yes. And I mean, I know from coaching many people, and I'm sure you're the same, that one of the things that people can struggle with is talking in meetings, presenting in meetings, speaking in front of people who are very senior, speaking in front of very senior stakeholders, people they don't know terribly well. And one of the things that can give you that extra bit of confidence or take it away is your kind of state of mind as you're approaching those kinds of tasks and how you show up internally as you approach those tasks, no matter how technically well prepared you are. So that's what we're going to be focusing on today. Wonderful. Where do we start with this then?
So we know that we need to show up in the right way. So how can we best support that?
Well, as ever in these situations, I do have a model that I can share with you. It's one of my personal favorites, and it actually comes from, well, to be honest, I don't know where it comes from. I encountered it in a primary school context. So when my kids were primary school age, I came across this model. But I think it just goes to show that a lot of the stuff that we talk about in strategy doesn't have to be super clever. It can just be common sense. So the model I want to introduce you to is called H.A.L.T, H.A.L.T. And they all stand for things that can have an impact on the way that we show up at work in any given moment. So H.A.L.T stands for hungry, angry, lonely, tired. You can see that would apply to young kids. But of course, it still applies to us as adults too. And if we just pick those apart just a little bit, we can see where this comes from. So hungry is our basic nutritional needs. As human beings, as possibly a little bit stressed human beings, we do need to look after ourselves. We have a responsibility to look after our nutrition, and that includes our hydration, because lack of hydration can actually affect the way your brain works. And we want our brains to be working really, really well at work. So nutrition, eating the right kind of food over the long term, and drinking enough water. But it might just mean today, have I had my lunch? When am I going to have some lunch? I mean, I'm a terrible one for getting hangry. We've all had the expression hangry. I need to factor in, when am I going to have a sandwich or something? Because I know that I won't be any good if I'm physically feeling hungry in that moment. Tackle the basics. So it's not being selfish. These are quite critical things to help us think our best and be our best in any given moment.
Yeah. And I think I am certainly one of those people who the entire world stops if I cannot stop my stomach from rumbling. I can't concentrate.
Yeah.
It is not one of those things that I can just ignore, maybe for a short time, but I do find it incredibly distracting
Yes.
to be hungry. And I was reading this week actually some of one of those really annoying influencers that talks about how you can be at your most productive at 4 a.m.
Oh,
And
yes.
he was saying in this blog that I happened upon that the best way to be productive is to power through the first 4 hours of your day without breakfast. That will then focus your mind on the task at hand.
I
And I
must admit,
thought, well, that certainly isn't me.
I'm not sure I'm on board with that influencer. No, definitely not. Sometimes I think it's really irritating being so aware of when I'm hungry. But actually, I think it is helpful, because so many people can get through to 3 o'clock and then realize that they haven't eaten anything. And
Mm,
your body and your brain needs it. It needs the fuel. So if you
yeah,
want to be thinking your best, you have to eat whatever, even if it's just a banana, you have to get some nutrition in there,
yeah.
and you have to be well hydrated.
Okay.
And
So that's the H.
so that's the H.
Hungry.
Hungry. Angry is the second one. And again, let's think of this a little bit broader. Angry, I tend to think, encompasses any what you might call inconvenient emotions, big
Mm,
inconvenient emotions. And how that shows up at work often is, if we've just had a meeting, let's say in the morning, with something, and either it's gone spectacularly well and I'm riding high, I'm cocky, I'm full of confidence, and I have to go into something else straight away. I have to go into a one-to-one or some sort of strategy meeting, or I have to go into a meeting where I'm doing lots of listening. Or let's say I've had a very stressful meeting, I've been undermined, I've been made to feel very angry in that meeting, for example, or conversation. Or maybe I've just read an email that's left me feeling very resentful, or, I've got some kind of strong feeling. It's very, very easy to take that feeling into the next piece of work that you do, into the next conversation,
mm.
into the next meeting. And that feeling maybe doesn't belong in that second meeting. The feeling belongs to the first task. So when we're thinking about angry and checking in with ourselves, am I angry? It's broader than that. Am I carrying any inconvenient emotions that belong to one task? Am I carrying them into another task where they're actually going to get in the way? So thinking about any big feeling that belongs, legitimately with one action, how do we notice that that's going on, and perhaps park it and say, I'm going to come back to that. But right now, I've got to go and have a one-to-one with a member of my team, and that emotion is not appropriate for this conversation I'm about to have. So it's about noticing.
And it could influence your impact in that scenario. It could influence how you approach that task. It could influence how you interact or communicate with someone. And
Yes.
that that can actually be, as we know, as leaders, our how we show up is very infectious. So if we show up angry, then the other person is going to pick up on that. So it's about that regulation, that self-regulation, I think.
Yeah, self-regulation is such an important task, regardless of if you are doing a strategic task or not. It's part of your professional, your toolkit around professional maturity,
Yes.
and just being a skillful executive, being able to self-regulate and notice when you are stressed out or angered, or kind of, overly
Mm,
excited about something that would
mm.
be inappropriate in the next conversation, because it does have an impact on everyone else that you're talking to. I mean, we've all been in situations where we've been talking to somebody who's carrying something else from a previous meeting. It's very easy for us to assume that that's something to do with us and that we've done something
Mm,
wrong. And often that's just not the case at all.
mm,
So
mm,
being able to notice, check in with yourself and self-regulate, deeply important.
mm,
Same absolutely applies to the third letter. We've done hungry, we've done angry, lonely. So lonely, again, you can see it in a primary school context, but in a professional context, I would include things like here about being, am I unsupported? Am I missing an ally? Do I need to get the support of some kind of senior stakeholder here? And this encompasses all kinds of things. There's a lot of work, a lot of research that's been done around the importance of having a friend at work.
mm,
And obviously, lockdown has changed the way that we have friends at work. We used to go and perch on someone else's desk and have a bit of a gossip with them. We used to go out and grab a sandwich with them. We used to maybe have a drink after work with somebody. We've got someone to go and cry in the loos with on occasion in our career. I'm sure most people have done that once or twice in their whole career. So the importance of having an ally, whether they're in the room or not, is kind of not the point, but it's whether you're feeling supported or are you feeling alone in whatever endeavor that you have. Are you walking into a meeting where you kind of think nobody's on my side here and what can I do about it? Because that can affect the way we show up. It can affect our readiness to join in. It
mm,
can affect our readiness to say what we're really thinking. It can affect our perception of psychological safety. It
mm,
can affect the way that we bring other people into the conversation if we're feeling quite isolated. So it's about just noticing without judgment. Oh, I notice I'm feeling quite lonely, or I'm feeling quite unsupported, or I'm feeling quite isolated in my position on this issue. And then it's a question of saying, who could I bring on board? Who could be my ally in this meeting or on this project that is going to advocate for either me personally or this project or whatever it is I'm working on? So that's how I think about interpreting lonely, because we can carry that loneliness into some other situation.
And I think it's probably fair to say that all executive roles come with a form of solitude because there are fewer people that you can confide in, that you can use as a sounding board. Perhaps you lead a department or you lead a team, but your peers have narrowed. There are fewer
Yeah.
peers. It's actually quite difficult to vent as a leader in a
Yes.
safe way in an organization, and that's a form of loneliness as well. And then coupled with that, as a leader, you are expected to perhaps position things that are new, different, challenging, that
Mm,
maybe don't have popular support. And one of your tasks is to generate popular support, and that can
yeah.
be quite a lonely exercise. But when we're feeling in this way, whether it's hungry, angry, lonely, or the last one, it is influencing our impact. It's influencing some
Yes.
of the decisions that we might make in the moment, that in a different frame of mind or a different mindset, a different physical state of being, we might make a different decision or a different choice.
Absolutely. And I think the key thing is noticing that that's how we're feeling
Mm,
and saying,
mm,
do I want that to influence how I show up in this next meeting or this next
yes.
conversation? If I don't want it to, then even just the act of noticing will make a big difference. And then a question you can ask yourself is, if I wasn't feeling lonely, if I wasn't feeling unsupported and isolated, how would I show up in this meeting? It's not, I don't think of it as that fake it till you make it, but just thinking, if I wasn't unsupported, would I speak up? If I
Mm,
wasn't feeling lonely, would I invite people to join my point of view? Would I
mm,
have reached out to somebody before the meeting and just done a little bit of stakeholder management? Because if we are feeling lonely, it can be very easy to shut ourselves away a little bit.
mm,
So what would somebody who wasn't feeling lonely do in this moment?
mm,
Can be a helpful question to ask, because it might just prompt an answer that actually you could do. And the act first, and then you might feel a bit less isolated.
mm.
So that's
So the
lonely.
fourth, so that's lonely.
Yeah.
Fourth one is tired, T.
It's T. Halt, H.A.L.T is tired. And I mean, this seems really obvious, isn't it? We are in senior roles, we're working really hard. we might be carrying around a bit of stress and uncertainty around with us. And tiredness can show up in all kinds of formats. It can show up in emotional tiredness. It can show up in physical tiredness. So I think we do have a responsibility to look after ourselves physically, make sure we get enough sleep, make sure we get enough fresh air, make sure we get enough daylight. There's been a lot of evidence in the last couple of years around the impact of daylight on our body clocks, our body rhythms, and the way that our brains work. So getting outside as soon as possible in the day.
Maybe that will help my jet lag.
Oh, maybe. Are you still jet lagged?
Still
You are
jet lag.
still jet lagged.
Can't
If you're
believe
still
it.
jet lagged when this podcast goes out, you definitely need to go outside. But tiredness, like we all know, and we say, oh, I just need to get a good night's sleep. But there are various things to do, which we all probably avoid doing around getting a good night's sleep. Going to bed at the same time each night is scientifically proven to be very valuable. Avoiding screens. I mean, I'm a sucker for Instagram before bed. But it is one of the worst things you can do, isn't it? Getting rid of the screens before you go to bed. Having a cool bedroom is another one. So there's various things we can do around sleep. But I think also related to this T of tiredness, are we getting enough exercise? Are we getting enough fresh air? And are we looking after our emotional well-being as well? All of our different forms of energy, how are we observing them? How are we managing them over the long term and also over the short term in this moment? If I'm feeling really knackered Friday afternoon and I know I've still got another 2-3 hour meeting, can I just go outside for 5 minutes and take some gulps of fresh air? Can I just kind of try and reset myself a little bit before going into that meeting?
Yeah, there is a concept of emotional energy management that I
Mhm.
sometimes refer to with coaching clients. And it relates to this idea that there's positive emotions and there are negative emotions or perhaps unhelpful emotions.
Yeah.
And it relates to the idea that some emotions that we experience take a lot of energy and some
Yeah.
emotions are quite low energy.
Mhm.
And if you were to plot those on a 2 by 2 matrix, you've got the high energy at the top, and you've got the low energy at the bottom, and you've got the positive ones on the right hand side and the negative ones on the left. And the idea is that that top right, high energy, positive emotions is a bit like your flow zone. It's
Mhm.
that I'm challenged, but I'm challenged in the right way. I'm feeling energized. I'm feeling excited. I'm feeling positively, you
Yeah.
know,
Motivated and ready to go.
exactly.
Yeah.
But you can't possibly be in that top right box the whole time. We don't have that kind of energy reserve. We need to mindfully recharge our batteries. We need to positively do some low energy activities that
What
effectively are
what
like recharge.
So what kind of emotions would go in that low energy positive
That would
box?
be
Really
relaxation. There'd be emotions in there around contentment, being in a
calm, presume calm might be in there.
calm. Exactly. So there's those sorts of emotions that enable us to just take a moment,
Mhm.
stepping away, but are not necessarily negative. They are
Yes.
just relaxation
Yeah.
type emotions.
Yes.
And what happens is that we then sometimes, so we're all human, switch into more negative forms of emotion.
Mhm.
And those would sit on the left hand side. So there might be anger, there might be frustration, there might be
So
jealousy or resentment.
those
There
feel
might
quite high energy negative emotions, aren't they? They take quite a lot out of
exactly.
you, don't they?
Yes, yes. And then on the sort of the low energy negative, we've got kind of exhaustion, burnouts, and boredom
Yeah,
is one
yeah.
that sits there as well because that can really eat away.
A lack of engagement, feeling that sort of detachment could sit in
Mm,
that corner, couldn't it? Which
mm,
is like,
mm.
I'm not engaged, but I'm not gonna kind of fight it. I'm just going to be resigned to it.
Yes. So when we're thinking about tiredness in the Holt model,
Mm,
obviously we're thinking about the physical side of things, sleep and the things that we've talked about already. But we are also talking about, are we depleting our reserves and our
yes.
energy through the high energy, less helpful emotions when we could actually choose to be more in a positive frame of mind or mindfully recharging before we get ourselves too exhausted.
Oh, nice. I like that, because it's quite interesting to think, because sometimes we can say, oh, I'm really knackered. I shouldn't be this tired because I've had a really good day. And
Mm,
actually, a good day could still be quite an exhausting day, couldn't it? Because if you've been
mm,
very excited, if you've been you could be quite agitated along with all of those positive emotions.
mm, mm.
So it could still take quite a lot out of you, even if you do perceive that actually it was a really good day.
Well, you're absolutely right. But I think the big thing as well is that we sometimes just try to ignore how exhausted we feel and
Yeah.
just kind of go, oh, I'm just going to power through. I'm just going to power through.
Yes.
And actually, that's not giving us enough time in that low energy positive box,
Yes.
which is effectively our recharge, because we know our phone doesn't last forever before we actually have to plug it in, and we
Mhm.
don't last forever without plugging in as well. So we need to give ourselves the space to do that recharge.
Yes, indeed. Indeed. That's a good place to wrap up the H.A.L.T model. So we're talking about H.A.L.T, hungry, angry, lonely, tired, as
Mm,
a way of checking in with yourself. How am I showing up today? How am I about to show up on the call I'm about to get on, or the conversation I'm about to have? It's just, or how am I today? You could use it across any time frame, couldn't you? Behind each of those words is quite a lot of either helpful or unhelpful emotional turmoil that's going on, that you could be bringing with you into a meeting when actually it's not helpful to do so. And that's
exactly.
other people may experience, rather than your fabulously calm, rational, strategic thinking, which you may also be bringing in, but that may get overshadowed a little bit.
Yeah. So let's say we notice our anger. We know that we need to manage our emotions to help with our kind of, energy levels and so on, but also manage our emotions in terms of the A in the Holt model. Let's say it's an anger
Mhm,
scenario. What
mhm.
can we do to let go of that anger? It's all very well saying you've got to let go of that anger, but what can we do to do that? What would you suggest?
What would I suggest? Well, you're asking me like I've got an answer. I do I do have an answer. Whether it's the answer, I don't know. Um, is this a good moment to bring in tennis players? Is that where we
I
think
think it's
about going?
always a good idea to bring in tennis players.
It's always you can bring in the tennis, because I know you're a big tennis fan, and I will bring in the model. So one of the things you will have observed about tennis players, if you watch any tennis whatsoever, is that between points they will do some fidgeting. It might be with their racket, it might be with their ball or balls, it might be with their, I was going to say costume, but I'm not really a sportsman, but with their outfit. Jem, who do you know that is very well known for their fidgeting and their little fidgety ritual?
Well, it's got to be Nadal,
Yeah.
really.
What does
Nadal has
he do?
got a little routine that he does between each and every point when serving, but he also does it when receiving as well. But I think the interesting thing about this is if you think about a tennis game, players are wanting to win each and every point.
Yes.
So it's almost like you've got a micro moment in each and every at steps during every match.
Yes.
And if you don't know much about tennis, what I can say is that when you're serving a point for the next point, you have, I can't remember if it's 25 or 30 seconds
Oh,
to be able to serve the next point.
I did not know there was
Otherwise,
a time limit on it.
otherwise you run out of time
Okay.
and you're penalized. Let's say it's 30 seconds. 30 seconds between the end of the point and you having to serve the next ball.
And I guess the
Now,
critical point there is that you might have just lost the previous point.
mm,
You might have
mm,
battled through it. You might have messed up. You might even have fallen over. You might have won it. You might
mhm.
have lost it. But you've
You
got to
might
go
have had a
into.
shouting match with the umpire
Yes.
about that
Yes.
point.
You might have hit a ball, boy. These things happen. But you've got to go into the next point afresh, haven't you? That.
Yeah, and the reason I like this particular little hack, if you like, is it is only 30 seconds,
Yes.
and often that we sort of dismiss our ability to reset ourselves simply
Yeah.
because we are back to back, we're too busy, we're crazy busy, and we just move from one thing to the next. There
Yes.
is a 30-second hack that means that you can reframe and get yourself ready for the next meeting or the next thing that you need to do, and cast off as much as possible the emotion from the previous one, so that A doesn't get carried over into the next interaction. Do you want to take us through it?
I will absolutely take you through it. And actually, you can still use it because it is very, very quick. You can still use it in the middle of something. It doesn't have to be between things. So
Mm,
that's the obvious place.
mm,
But if something goes amiss in the middle of a session, a conversation or something, and you feel like you need to reset yourself, then you can still use this. So it's called the 4R models. These are 4 tiny, tiny actions for you to do, which will help you reset. They use the word rituals. Rituals means things that you do regularly that has some kind of meaning. So it's not just
mm,
I'm scratching my nose because I just scratch my nose. There's no reason for it. These are kind of intentional things that we do because they have some meaning to us and they
mm,
represent something to us. So if we think about rituals in that context, the first R is to recover. So we've just finished. Let's just say we've got back-to-back calls. We've just finished a call. We've said goodbye. We've clicked the leave the meeting button, or we've walked out of the room. We have to first acknowledge that that task is finished. Often we'll kind of go, whew, we'll have a breath and we'll sort of go, oh, thank goodness for that, or whatever it might have been. So we just simply acknowledge that task is finished, or that part of the meeting is finished, or that moment has passed, to recover. And so that might involve us closing our book. It might involve us clicking leave meeting and then having a stretch, or looking out the window. It might involve us checking our phones. These are all tiny, tiny things that we might do. We're not talking about a big thing. We're talking about little tiny things that you
mm,
intentionally do to acknowledge that that moment has finished. So recover is the first one. The second one is to relax your body as a result of the fact that that thing has finished. So this is a bit of a moment in between. That thing has finished, the next thing hasn't quite started yet, and I need to just try and check in with my body and try and relax it. The
mm,
obvious thing to do here is simply to take a couple of deep breaths.
mm.
You can
Which is what
stretch.
tennis players do. They have a breathing
Yes. A
session,
little a
and we
little
should be
breathing
doing that too.
ritual, which is
Mm,
intentional. I mean, you're going to breathe anyway, let's face it, but that's not a ritual. It's to intentionally breathe, or roll your shoulders, tip your head to one side, take your glasses
mm,
off and rub your eyes. It doesn't matter what it is. It's just a few seconds that you are intentionally doing to kind of relax your body and bring some level of sort of self-comfort into that moment. My little breathing one, which is super simple, is breathe in deeply and breathe out slowly. And that's literally all it is. I do that 3 times. It takes about 5 or 6 seconds. Breathe in deeply, breathe out slowly. It's not particularly mindful, but it really helps me just to kind of physically power down and power back up. So
mm,
that's relax. We've done recover. We've done relax, which is the moment in between. We're now doing refocus. So we're now literally turning our focus, turning our gaze onto the next thing. Say, right, we are now going to be having a different part of this conversation, or we're now going to be going into a conversation with somebody else. So what can I do for that? Can I think to myself, okay, how do I want to show up in this meeting? What is the most important thing I need to achieve in this meeting? What can my best contribution be to this conversation? It's a mindful moment where you're just checking in with yourself. Okay, here is a new task. I need to show up. I want to be seen as a strategic professional. How am I best going to do that? And then the last R is ready, which is again a physical act to kick off the next thing. Now, this might be turning over a new page in your notebook and writing the name of the person that you're speaking to down. It might be opening a new tab on your computer and putting
mm,
some notes in there. It could be picking up a pen and clicking it 3 times. It doesn't matter what it is. It's a tiny micro action that physically marks the beginning of the next thing. So we've got 4 little minor rituals. One is to recover physically, acknowledge that the previous task is finished. To relax, that moment in between, which is breathing, is stretching, are your friends in this one. Refocusing your mind on what's to come and how you want to show up and how you want to be remembered in that task. And then a physical action to show that you are ready to open the next part of the conversation or the next thing. Those things could be 3, 4, 5 seconds each. The main thing is that you're doing them with purpose. You're
mm,
doing them intentionally. You're doing them because this is what I'm doing. I'm recovering. I'm relaxing. I'm refocusing. Okay, next thing right in front of me. and I am ready. I've got my notepad, I've got my
Mm,
pen, I've got my laptop, whatever I've got, off we go. And
mm,
it could just be a matter of seconds that you have between task A and task B. But just mindfully going through those 4 different kind of positions will help
mm. I
to
like
leave
it.
behind and set off into the new thing. And that is based on that is the 4 R's is the same model that the tennis players use to go, okay, well,
Mm,
what are the little twitches that I'm going to do? I remember you thinking, he can't always have an itchy eyebrow. He doesn't have an itchy eyebrow at all. It's just that that's one of his rituals that he puts in there to help him go through that process. Recover, relax, refocus, and ready.
fabulous. Now we've got some information that you can refer to in the show notes on those things. So don't worry if you're out and about and listening to this and not able to take notes, you'll be able to then refer to it at a later date.
And they both fit onto a Post-it. So if you want to keep them in front of you to just help you remember to do this stuff,
Hmm.
whack them on a Post-it, stick them on your screen.
So hopefully what we've covered today helps to show that it's not only knowing what to do in order to be more strategic, but there's some strategic impact considerations for us to take into account, to really think about, and to not underestimate the importance of some of these basic fundamentals on how we show up as being an enabler to us being more strategic in
Mm-hmm.
our day to day.
I think they also enable us to be more productive. They enable us to be more inclusive and more collaborative. So they support a whole bunch of things
Yes.
as well as being strategic. But I think if you are going to be presenting something or talking people through something that's quite a high level, that these are only going to help get you in the right frame of mind to do that really well.
Great. I think probably in the future, we're going to also start talking a little bit about frame of mind and mindset. So
Mm-hmm.
let's hold that thought.
Well, let's dangle that
So
carrot, shall we?
just dangle that carrot. Absolutely.
Thank you very, very much for listening.
Thanks everyone for listening. And you know where we are. If you've got any feedback, please do drop us a line.
I'll see you next time.
Thank you for listening to this episode of The Strategic Leader. If you liked the episode, please subscribe to access more of our recordings. And if you think it'd be useful for someone else, please forward to them and leave a review. We base our content on questions we are regularly asked and what you want to know more about, so please do email us with any questions or comments to gemma@gemmabullivant.co.uk. And remember, you're already being more strategic than you realise.